It is 6:30, and I want to make sure we have enough time. We have the council meeting right after this. I just want to make sure that WHCI is ready for us. And Yeraida, could you let me know? I see Jenna on, but
yes, WHCI is ready to go. Ready when you are, Mayor Cantor. WHCI is all set.
okay, I think we are all here. The hearing will come to order. Good evening. I am Mayor Sherry Cantor, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's virtual public hearing on the following two ordinances. Ordinance authorizing an appropriation of $365 million to fund all or a portion of the town's unfunded actuarial accrued liability with respect to the town's employee pension plan and authorizing the issuance of general obligation pension bonds in an amount not to exceed $365 million to finance such appropriation. I just want to confirm that WHCI is filming. Yeraida, could you confirm?
Yes, I have confirmed with her, and yes, she is filming. There may be a little delay, but she is on.
I just want to confirm WHCI. Can somebody confirm?
Mayor Cantor, I received a text from her. She is on.
I am not hearing anybody else, so I just want to. No, I can't hear anybody. 1 second. All right. Okay, now it's very echoey. I don't know if somebody has something on. Thank you so much. I think we're all set. I'm just going to repeat it one more time just to make sure that this is public. The hearing will come to order. This is the public hearing 1/26/2021. Good evening. I am Mayor Sherry Cantor, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's virtual public hearing on the following two ordinances. Ordinance authorizing an appropriation of $365 million to fund all or a portion of the town's unfunded actuarial accrued liability with respect to the town's employee pension plan and authorizing the issuance of general obligation pension bonds in an amount not to exceed $365 million to finance such appropriation. And ordinance establishing a general obligation pension bonds reserve fund. Because in-person attendance at public meetings is likely to increase the risk of transmission of COVID-19, this hearing is being conducted virtually in accordance with Governor Lamont's public health emergency and civil preparedness orders. Before we begin, I would like to note that the required legal notice was published on the town's website and published in the Hartford Courant. The ordinance materials have been posted and are available for review on the town's website in accordance with the governor's executive orders. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Blanks,
Present.
Ms. Cantor,
Here.
Mr. Davidoff,
Here.
Ms. Fay,
Present.
Mr. Gold,
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan,
Here.
Mr. Sweeney,
Here.
Mr. Winograd,
Here.
and Mr. Williams.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. This is Mayor Cantor again. I would like to note that we have a full quorum of the council. Because of the virtual format of the hearing, there are some special rules and procedures that I need to cover before we begin. I should know these by heart, but I don't completely. I would like to start with a brief overview of the process. We will begin with a presentation by town staff and their consultants. Following the presentation by town staff, we will open up the floor to members of the public. And I will explain how that process will work in a moment. After public comment is over, town staff will have 5 minutes to address any issues raised during public comment. Then members of the council will have the opportunity to ask questions of town staff. I will call on the council in alphabetical order. Each member of the council will have 5 minutes to ask questions. Each question, if there's an undue amount of time, I can apply a lot more time. I may grant additional times if it's appropriate. Also, I will ask participants, including town staff and the members of the council, not to address each other directly. Comments and questions must be made through the chair. After you state your name, simply preface your question or comment through the chair. When you are done, I will recognize the person who's most appropriate to respond. As to the public comment portion of the public hearing, we will open the floor to members of the public after the presentation by town staff who may participate by video or phone using WebEx. Instructions on how to participate can be found on the meeting notice that is posted on the town website, www.westhartfordct.gov, in the government section under meetings and agendas. With that, I invite town staff to begin their presentation. We will start with Mr. Hart, town manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, town manager. Thank you all for joining tonight's meeting. If Ms. Reinheimer could please give me the ability to share my screen. She has, that's great. Let me pull this up. And Mayor, Mr. Privatera and I have roughly a 10-minute presentation for you all. And the council is quite familiar with all of this, but really for the benefit of the public, we wanted to have an opportunity to spend a few minutes on this presentation. First of all, and before I introduce the team, I would like to thank Mayor Cantor for bringing this idea to town staff some years ago. Mayor Cantor has a very good knowledge of municipal finance and brought this idea to our attention, and we've reviewed it a couple of times over the year. So I do want to credit and thank her for her initiative. I'd also like to thank the Pension Bonds Work Group, which has worked extremely hard on this initiative, in particular, Peter Privatera, our own Director of Financial Services. And Peter has been assisted by Becky Seelman, our consulting actuary from Milliman, Bill Lindsay, our longtime financial advisor with Munistat Financial Advisors, Matt Ritter, our bond counsel from Shipman and Goodwin, and Chris Cashmar, our investment advisor from DeMeo, Schneider, and Associates. And last but certainly not least, our own corporation counsel, Dallas Dodge, has assisted quite a bit, particularly with the ordinance to establish a pension bond reserve fund. So starting off with an overview, for the members of the public, what are we trying to achieve here? We are seeking council's approval to do two things. Number one, to approve an ordinance that would authorize the issuance of $365 million in pension obligation bonds for a 25-year term. Number two, we're seeking council approval to adopt an ordinance that would establish a pension bond reserve fund. Now, it's important to point out that pension obligation bonds, they are obligations of the municipality, of the town government, not of its pension fund. And pension obligation bonds are POBs, that's the acronym we use. They are a taxable instrument, which means you pay a little bit higher interest rate than you would on tax-exempt bonds. And POBs are limited to covering what's called the unfunded accrued liability. And here in West Hartford, it is significant. That's one of the main reasons why this proposal is in front of the council. As of last July 1st, it was measured at $315 million. Now, this bond issuance, if approved, it would bring our pension plan to approximately 100% funded, almost 100% funded as of July 1, 2021 of this year. Presently, the funded level is at 40.6%, which Mr. Privatera will speak to in a couple of minutes. And once the town sells these bonds, our pension board, and our pension board is appointed by the town council, they would deposit the proceeds from the bonds into our pension trust. And with the advice of Mr. Kashmar and others, they would gradually invest these funds in higher yielding asset classes. So the town, we've worked hard here to be diligent, to be very conservative. And we are assuming a conservative discount or asset growth rate of 6.25% on our investments over the life of the bond repayment schedule. And that 6.25% compares quite favorably to the interest rate that we expect to pay on the bonds themselves, which we project will be at 3% or less. The town will repay those pension bond proceeds in the form of debt service payments, and our estimate is that those will total a little under $21 million at $20.9 million per year, and that will be a fixed payment throughout the 25-year schedule. Now, we will have a remaining pension payment, and that's called in municipal language the actuarially determined employer contribution, or ADEC, and that would range from $7 to $12 million per year over the bond repayment schedule. Right now, that ADEC is at approximately $29 million a year. And we would plan to use our investment earnings to mitigate or help cover the cost of those future ADEC payments at $7 to $12 million a year. So as a very unique aspect of our proposal, very innovative from my perspective, is that the council would also create and establish a pension bond reserve fund. What would be the purpose of the reserve fund? The reserve fund would provide a funding source, should the town need it, for periods of economic volatility that might cause an increase, a significant increase, in that remaining ADEC payment. Recall, the ADEC payment going forward is going to range from roughly $7 to $12 million a year. And the town will be able to utilize that reserve fund to shield it from that volatility so that we can absorb any year-over-year increase in that annual ADEC payment of more than 5%. So let's say 5 years down the road, the ADEC period is going to increase by 7-8%, depending on market conditions. We will have this fund available to draw upon. And we're going to establish the reserve fund by using the monies, a little under $27 billion, that's our projection, that we would normally budget as our ADEC payment for next fiscal year. We have built in some safeguards within this ordinance, and the ordinance requires the town to use the reserve fund exclusively for pension liability payments to pay down outstanding debt service related to the pension obligation bonds only. And the ordinance prohibits the use of the reserve fund for any other purpose. So it operates something like a lockbox to that extent. Now, through you, Mayor Cantor, I would like to turn to Mr. Privatera to talk about the reasons why we have presented this proposal for council consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Privatera? We're not hearing you, Mr. Privatera. I'm not sure if you're on mute.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. I wasn't quick enough on the button.
I understand.
Pete Privatera, Director of Finance. As the town manager stated earlier, we have a large unfunded liability. As of July 1st, 2020, it was measured at about $315 million. And the plan's funded ratio is 40.6%. Now, the funded ratio is one of the metrics that the rating agencies use to measure, the town's fiscal health. We have been very diligent over the last 10 years to take all the necessary steps to include this funded ratio. And we've gradually reduced the discount rate. We updated mortality tables. We've negotiated changes in benefit structures with the unions. But with all that action that we've taken, the actual funded ratio has declined. 5 years ago, it was at 45%. Now it's down to 40.6%. We've taken all the action, but we haven't been able to really put a dent in that funded ratio category. Now, again, despite all these steps, we haven't made a lot of progress in that funded ratio. But the town's annual ADEC payment or annual contribution to the pension fund has increased, and it just exacerbates the problem and the concern. So every year, the increase gets greater and greater. As the town manager stated, next year's payment is about $27 million. And if we do nothing, we're looking at least $1 million to $2 million increase annually over the next 25 years to take care of that unfunded liability. So the unfunded liability, the annual payment, the ADEC, is one of the town's most significant cost drivers. Again, a little under $27 million. The issuance of these pension obligation bonds would allow the town to basically fund that obligation at a lower cost. As the manager stated, our expectation is that we will sell the bonds at 3% or less, take the bond proceeds, deposit in the pension fund, and gradually increase that investment rate to about 6.25% annually over the term of the repayment schedule. Now, based on some analysis that was performed by our consulting actuary, Becky Seelman, it indicates that if we achieve that average growth rate, we could see a net present value savings of a little under $141 million over the 30-year period. Now, we're going to have years that it goes up, we're going to have years that it goes down, but the way it's measured is on an average basis. So that is based on an average basis. We're not going to hit exactly 6.25 every year, but on an average basis, we feel confident that we will hit it over a 25-year period. Next slide, please. One of the reasons why we're doing this, the town is taking advantage of historically low interest rates. As the town manager stated earlier, the mayor brought this to our attention years ago, and we have been looking at this. And a few years back, we were considering it, but the interest rates weren't quite there. They were starting to rise again, and it just didn't make sense for us to take that step at that time. Now, West Hartford is financially sound. We're a AAA rated bond rating from both Moody's and S&P. AAA is the highest rating you can get. And I think that when we bring this to their attention and we basically explain our conservative process and all the action that we're taking, I think it'll be well received. Again, one of the unique characteristics of this package is the creation of the pension bond reserve fund. Now, we have never seen that. I have never seen that, nor has anyone on my team ever seen that attached to a pension bond reserve issuance. It provides us a sort of an insurance policy. We know there's going to be rough economic times. We know there's going to be good economic times over the next 25 years. That is meant to buffer against the rough economic times, so our contributions will be limited to a 5% increase on a year-over-year basis. Now, we're pretty confident about this. Our consulting actuary, Becky Seelman from Milliman, created the stochastic model. And what that model does is it runs 10,000 possible scenarios on asset returns. and the usage of our fund, of our reserve fund. Basically, would we run out of money before the end of that bond repayment period? And in roughly 97% of those scenarios, we would not. So that's a very good indication that this is a conservative package we're putting together, and we're very comfortable moving forward with it and making this recommendation. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. Mr. Hart, is there anything? Okay, we're going to public comment now.
Yes, Mayor.
Okay. Public Works truck right outside. So we're going to public comment section. We will now take public comments from the general public. We have afforded the public the opportunity to comment either using WebEx via video or phone, which we will begin in a moment. In addition to the opportunity to comment live, members of the public were invited to provide written comments, and any written comments we received have been published in the town's website as a PDF and are embedded on the online agenda. All written comments were also provided to the council and town staff for review. I will ask the clerk to please read into the record the names of any persons who submitted written comments. Essie, please, Madam Clerk, please read the names of any received comments.
There was only one, Jeffrey Mitchell of 60 Briarwood Road, and he suggests that the council consider following Government Finance Officers Association recommendations in regard to pension obligation bonds.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We will now open the floor for live comments from the public. Again, we both have video and phone access for you. Instructions on how to participate by video may be found on the meeting notice that is posted on the town website. Again, the website is www.westhartfordct.gov in the government section under meetings and agendas. For those who wish to comment by phone, please call 1-408-418-9388. That's 1-408-418-9388 and enter access code 132-494-5278. Again, 132-494-5278. The moderator will first recognize the video participants. She will unmute and recognize participants one by one. We will then move to the phone participants who will be unmuted one by one, recognized by the last two digits of your phone number. Callers will then have to press *6 to unmute their phone line. Out of respect for everyone who wishes to participate, speakers should keep comments brief, concise, and limited to 3 minutes. Speakers providing testimony on behalf of a group may speak for up to 5 minutes. All speakers must state their name and address. I would also ask comments to preface their remarks by stating whether they are in support or opposed to the ordinance. As a reminder, phone and WebEx access is only for members of the public who wish to speak. If you do not wish to speak, we recommend you hang up and leave the meeting, listen on TV or streaming on internet. If you have called in and are streaming on the meeting or watching on TV, please silence your other device when you speak. Otherwise, there will be an echo because there's a slight delay on the TV or streaming broadcast. Finally, all comments must be germane to the proposed ordinances, and I ask everyone to be respectful. Obscene, offensive, or threatening language will not be tolerated. Anyone who violates the rule will receive a warning, and if the conduct continues, I will ask the moderator to mute that person's phone line for the remainder of the public hearing. If the violation is egregious, that person will be muted immediately. Madam Moderator, please initiate the public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We only have one person on video, and I will now unmute John Lyons. Please unmute your device and begin speaking, sir.
All righty. Thank you, Yeraida. Hello, my name is John Lyons, and I live at 21 Chestnut Hill Road here in West Hartford. First, I'd like to say happy birthday to Councilman Chris Williams. I am speaking today to express my support for Mayor Cantor and the Town Council's plan of selling pension obligation bonds, funding the elimination of the town's pension liability, and to create a reserve fund for the town. I think this is the most important and impactful financial decision this town is facing this century and likely much longer. If properly managed, it will pay huge financial dividends to the community for decades, as well as help control taxes. Through Mayor Cantor's leadership, the town is fully funding what had been unfunded pension commitments and creating a carefully managed fund that, if left untouched, will start with nearly $27 million invested by expert investment professionals and grow exponentially over the next 25 years. The plan is forward-looking, creative, and most importantly, safe. The bond offering itself will save the town $140 million in pension costs calculated in present value over the course of 25 years. Most of that savings will be realized by future councils well into the bond term. Additionally, by investing $26.9 million, based on the conservative return estimate of 6.25%, this fund could and will grow to many times the initial investment. This is on top of the $140.9 million already being saved by the town in adopting this measure. For comparison, the S&P Index Fund has returned over 10% average annual return since its inception in 1957. The overall market has returned over 8% since 1927, prior to the Great Depression. So 6.25% is an eminently conservative assumed rate of return by the town. Through Mayor Cantor's and the rest of the council's leadership, we have an opportunity to ensure fiscal security for West Hartford far into the future. Finally, for the Republican members of council, this measure addresses many key tenets of the Republican Party platform. It saves tremendous amounts of money, invests money in the future, and assures very manageable taxes for residents for years to come. It allows us to work on affordable housing, school improvement, infrastructure, the arts, and attract industry and commerce, further solidifying West Hartford's base. Voting yes will show not only that you support key Republican talking points and are willing to work with your colleagues across the aisle for the betterment of our community, but are willing to assure future generations of residents residing here in West Hartford have a better financial future. I strongly encourage all councilors to unanimously vote yes on this measure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. And I thank you. I think that was the only person that was on video, Madam Moderator.
Yes, Madam Mayor. No
Okay.
public comments.
Are there any callers?
No callers at the moment.
Okay. All right. If we will go to town staff, I would like you to address Mr. Mitchell's the email that Mr. Mitchell sent in that we had received by written comment was looking at the GFOA's statements on pension obligation bonds that have been unchanged for a very long time, the GFOA statements. And I was wondering if you could answer some of the concerns and the questions. It's a little verbose, but if there's a way you can summarize that, that would be very helpful. Through you, Mr. Hart, I think I'm going to go directly to Mr. Privatera unless you have an issue with that. If you can, Mr. Privatera, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pete Privatera, Finance Director for the town. With respect to the Government Finance Officers Association's recommendations, we did receive a question. We addressed them individually. I mean, from my perspective, that has been put out there for a long time with respect to the concerns that GFOA has on POBs. Times have changed and investments have changed, but I'll go through some of them really quickly. The first one is the invested POB proceeds might fail to earn more than the interest rate over the term of the bonds, leading to increased overall liabilities for the government. Again, that's a possibility. However, in order to offset that problem, the town is establishing a pension bond reserve fund, and that the purpose of that reserve fund is solely to use to mitigate any economic downturns and any situations where the town may be put at risk. Again, you know, that our consulting actuary has run 10,000 different scenarios, and basically 97% of those scenarios say that we're going to have some money left over by the end of the 25-year period. Also, you know, the investment rate that we're using is very conservative. So we're going in with a very conservative bond interest rate. My hope is it comes in at less than 3%, but we're also investing at an asset growth rate that's very conservative at 6.25%. And again, our investments with the pension fund over the last 10 years have returned 9.6%, and over the last 20 years have returned, I think, 6.4%. So we think it's very conservative. The second GFOA comment is POBs are complex instruments that carry considerable risk. POB structures may incorporate the use of guaranteed investment contracts, swaps, or derivatives, which must be intensely scrutinized, as these embedded products can introduce counterparty risk, credit risk, and interest rate risk. I mean, my response to that is we are using general obligation bonds, the same bonds we use to finance our infrastructure. The only difference is that they're taxable. We are not doing anything with swaps or derivatives or any other type of transaction. We're selling GO bonds like we normally would. The third comment they make is issuing taxable debt to fund the pension liability increases the jurisdiction's bonded debt burden and potentially uses up debt capacity that could be used for other purposes. We are using up some of our debt capacity, but the state requirement basically says that our overall debt limit is 7 times our last tax receipts. So our debt limit is $1.9 billion. Our outstanding debt is $129 million, and we would be adding $365 million to that, notwithstanding any debt that we add in the future. So we are well below that debt threshold. We have plenty of capacity to continue our capital improvement programs. Next item, POBs are frequently structured in a manner that defers the principal payments or extends repayment periods over a period longer than the actuarial amortization period, thereby increasing the sponsor's overall costs. We are not deferring any principal. Our structure is going to be level payment, meaning the principal and interest payment will be the same every year. And we are not extending it past our existing amortization period, which is a 25-year remaining amortization period. So we're not doing any of that. Next point, rating agencies may not view the proposed issuance of POBs as credit positive because if the issuance is not part of a more comprehensive plan to address pension funding shortfalls. Well, this is a comprehensive plan to address pension funding shortfalls. We're fully funding our liability. I think that when we finally, if this is approved, when we state our case to the rating agencies, I think it's going to be a very good case. Again, we're doing this on a very conservative basis. We're taking advantage of very low interest rates. We have very conservative asset growth rates, and we also have a reserve fund that's going to buffer us against any tough economic times that might come down the road. So I think we're in a very good position with this structure, and I think we've answered in a positive manner all the concerns that GFOA has listed on their website. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Privateri. That was a very good summary of what can be a very complicated question and answers. So now we will go, any other further comments for Mr. Hart?
Matt Hart, Town Manager. No, Mayor, thank you. And want to thank Mr. Privatera for that comprehensive response to the last question.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. All right, we will now go to councilor questions. I will call on the members of the council in alphabetical order. Each member of the council will have 5 minutes to ask questions, inclusive of the answers. It's my discretion as chair, however, to grant additional time if needed. But before I go there, I want to say happy birthday, Mr. Williams. He's last in alphabetical order, but you're first on in our hearts tonight, and we wish you a happy birthday. And then I want to make sure that we recognize the team that is all here on behalf of, as Mr. Hart mentioned before, thank you all for being here. Okay, we'll start with Councilor Blanks. And also one more preface, we have had many meetings on this. So if councilors don't have questions, it's not because they haven't vetted and asked lots of questions and kicked the tires. It's because they've been previously answered. So I want the public to understand that this is something we've been working on for years, and but most extensively in the past few months, several months. So thank you so much. All right, now to you, Ms. Blanks.
Thank you through you, Madam Mayor. And I too would like to send birthday greetings to Councilor Williams. Happy birthday. I'm not going to belabor this any further. I have asked many questions throughout this process. I would only like to comment again and just send huge thanks to the entire team, also to the pension bond work group for all of the extensive work that you've done throughout this process. You've certainly made it easier for me to understand this entire process, and it's clear that the town is stepping up and taking responsibility to address this issue.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you, I'd also like to wish our colleague, Mr. Williams, a very happy birthday. And just tell you one thing, Chris, we've all had birthdays during council meetings, but tonight might be your lucky night because we might get done earlier than normal. So hopefully that's the case. I do have one question, either to Mr. Hart or Mr. Privatera. If this is adopted, what is the timeline with respect to the issuance of the bonds?
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. We do have a few steps to go through with respect to the state's review. I would defer to Mr. Privatera regarding the timing, the anticipated timing of the actual issuance.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Privatera? I think you're on mute.
I'm having a hard time with this tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pete Privatera, Finance Director. Upon passage of the ordinance, I believe the town clerk will post the ordinance and there will be a 10-day petition period. And if no petition is submitted that meets the threshold, then the ordinance is adopted. In the meantime, we will start working on putting together a number of required documents from the state treasurers and the secretary from the OPM's office. The town manager and myself, we've already met with them. And I thank you to our bond counsel, Matt Ritter, for getting us all the information. So we are gathering the information now. I'm assuming that the information that we provide them will be sufficient. They will come back to us with their opinion, but my expectation is that it'll be positive. So I'm assuming that once we wrap all this up, we will probably issue in April timeframe, and then we will close on the bonds hopefully the first week of July. We need to close on the bonds at the beginning of the new fiscal year, only because we are appropriating the reserve fund money for that new fiscal year, and we won't have it before then. And also, that will trigger a repayment schedule that will allow us to make our first debt service payment in fiscal year 23. So that's the expected timetable we have to issue in April, May at the latest, and close in July.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. Mr. Davidoff, anything further?
No, nothing further, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Ms. Fay?
To your point earlier, we've been discussing this for a while. I've had meetings with Matt and Peter and other council members. So I think I am good for now. I don't have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Mr. Gold?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, I did receive actually ironically enough, a text message from a taxpayer who wanted to ask a question. I just wanted to make sure that it was on the record. He did try calling in. It was from a Mr. Rick Bush, and I believe this would be directed through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Privatera. Terry, will all the money be invested all at once into a very high market, or will it be dollar cost averaged into the market over time? That was the question that was posed. And as a follow-up to that, I just did have one quick question, and I think I mentioned before, but is there still an opportunity to potentially overborrow to use those funds in a different capacity as it relates to their overall pension itself?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gold. And I think we do know that question to number one, but I'm going to go to Mr. Privatera and you can address both. both questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pete Privatera, Finance Director. Yes, we are dollar cost averaging. We've already had a couple of meetings with the pension board. Our investment advisor, Chris Cashmere, has introduced a couple of scenarios. Right now, we're looking at dollar cost averaging over the first 6 quarters to be on a conservative basis. The pension board is meeting again. We may come back and decide to do it over the first 8 quarters, just to be conservative. So we're not taking $359 million and dumping 60% of it in equities. We're being very frugal and very conservative with our investment for at least the first year and a half or 2 years. With respect to the second question, if you're asking, I mean, these monies can only be used to finance an accrued pension liability, a past service liability. They can't be used for anything else related to the pension fund. So we're limited in the scope of which we can use them. I hope that was your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. Mr. Gold?
Yes, thank you. And through you, Madam Mayor, I just wanted to thank the entire team for their extensive analysis and presentations. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Ms. Kerrigan?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Happy birthday, Councilor Williams. How fabulous. Yeah, thank you to everybody. This has been quite a process, getting into the weeds of finances. And for you, Mayor Cantor, you started this, 3-4 years ago, so you were way ahead of the rest of us. So to bring us all up to speed, took a lot of patience, and I appreciate it. I did have one lingering question. I know I've asked it, but I do want to be sure that I understand it fully. In the event that we go forward with this, and in the event that our own AAA rating takes a minor hit because of it, the answer that I was given when I asked the question was we're still in a better position to do this than to do nothing with respect to taking the risk of getting a hit for our own rating. Peter, I guess this would be for you. Could you just talk a little to that, how that comes to be that we're better off taking a minor risk with our own rating as opposed to doing nothing and carrying this obligation? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. We'll start with Mr. Privatera, but I would bet that Mr. Hart would like to weigh in on that as well. Thank you, Mr. Privatera.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If we do have a minor downgrade, the question is will we have a minor downgrade with one and maintain our AAA with the other? We think that's probably a worst case scenario. A minor downgrade is basically selling our bonds at a slightly higher interest rate. I don't think it will have an appreciable impact as opposed to having our pension liability increase by $1 million a year plus. Bill Lindsay and I, our financial advisor, have talked about this on many occasions, and we think that we still could sell bonds at close to at a AAA rate. There are some communities, such as the city of Stamford, who is at AAA, AA plus, and they're still selling their bonds at that rate. And Madam Mayor, I would just like to defer to Bill so he can comment on that because that's his area of expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Privatera. We will go to you, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pete, I agree with what your assessment. Again, a downgrade from one of the two rating agencies that the town is currently utilizing, would increase the town's borrowing costs, say 10 basis points on average. But that's a far cry from what is projected to be the annual increases in the pension contribution over the next 40 years. And I would also point out that a downgrade isn't a permanent situation. Is that the town has a number of positive credit strengths. The first and foremost, it's financial management, and I think that we would take some necessary steps to get that rating back to AAA if indeed one of the rating agencies were to take that kind of action. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Mr. Hart, anything further from you on this?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Mr. Privatera and Mr. Lindsay, I thought gave a very comprehensive response. Certainly, as Mr. Lindsay just explained, if we were to experience something of a downgrade from one of the rating agencies, I believe we could make a very strong presentation as to why the issuance of POBs was in the long-term best interest of the town. Mr. Privatera talked about earlier this evening how our rating agencies have often pointed to the funding level in our pension plan and expressed their concerns regarding that. You know, that's one of the few concerns they've had regarding the town's financial performance in recent years. And here's a plan to address that very issue. So I think we would be able to make a compelling case. And I do think the risk of a slight downgrade or a temporary downgrade is certainly worth it to realize the benefits associated with issuing the pension obligation bonds. Thank you. Mayor, you're muted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hart. Ms. Kerrigan, I pressed the button, it didn't work. Ms. Kerrigan, anything further from you?
No, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Dodge has asked to for me to call on him. So, Corporation Counsel, Dallas Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a point of clarification with regard to something that the Director of Finance said earlier. We do have special referendum rules for bond issuances, and so I believe that the Finance Director had said that residents of the town would have 10 days to pursue a referendum. It's actually 30 days in the case of a bond ordinance. So I just want to make sure that we were clear on that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. All right, Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have no questions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. I shouldn't have gone off mute. Mr. Winograd.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I also have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Mr. Birthday Boy Williams.
Thank you, Mayor, and I appreciate all the birthday wishes. I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. All right, is there anything further from any staff or anyone from the team for the public hearing? Otherwise, we will close the public hearing.
We're all set, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And again, thank you all for your work on this. We will begin the council meeting in 13 minutes at 7:30, and we will see you then. The public hearing without objection. I would like to close the public hearing. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, this public hearing is closed. See you in 13 minutes. Now 12. If you are able to put your video on, so I can see you. We will begin. I just want to make sure, again, WHCI is all set for us.
Madam Mayor, WHCI is all set and ready.
Thank you so much. Okay, we will be starting in 1 sec. I just want to make sure everybody's back. Okay, I will call the Tuesday, January 26, 2021 Town Council meeting to order, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you can stand, please do. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Ms. LeBrook.
Ms. Blanks?
Present.
Ms. Cantor?
Here.
Mr. Davidoff?
Here.
Ms. Fay? Ms. Fay? Mr. Gold?
Present.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Here.
Mr. Sweeney?
Here.
Mr. Winograd?
Here.
Mr. Williams? Mr. Williams?
Here.
Thank you. And Ms. Fay? I don't hear Ms. Fay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBrook. Somebody could text Ms. Fay and just check on her. We'll wait 1 minute. While we check on Ms. Fay, I just wanted to make a couple comments. As you know, I do recognize we are in a very, very challenging time and a severe pandemic. Our world has just passed a very sobering milestone of 100 million reported cases, of which 25.2 million are reported positive cases in the United States of America, with 420,000 deaths. Our thoughts and prayers are with these families that have been changed forever from this pandemic. Our community is also heartbroken by a tragic fire that impacted a family on Enfield Street on Saturday evening. We're very grateful to all of the first responders and especially the firefighters who fought this powerful blaze. We also want to thank the Red Cross for their assistance and support of the family, and Friends of Feeney, I know, is collecting money to support this displaced family, mourning family in need. I also want to take a moment to congratulate our new president, Joe Biden, and Vice President Kamala Harris, making history as our country's first woman elected to national office and first Black vice president and a vice president of South Asian descent. This is a daunting job in the best of times, but with all the challenges facing our country and our world, these are certainly extraordinarily difficult times. We know that self-government rests on the civility and the responsibility of the citizenry. We know we won't agree on all, and for some people, many of the policy decisions made by this administration, but we hope that the next 4 years are blessed ones for both the president and the vice president. And as President H.W. Bush wrote to President Clinton after the 1992 election, your success is now our country's success. And we need this success to save lives and recover economically, emotionally, spiritually, and fully as a united country. And we will go now to the public forum. Any resident or taxpayer of the town who wishes to address the council regarding any item on the agenda which is not otherwise subject to the public hearing may call in at 408-418-9388. That's 408-418-9388. Access code 132-494-5278. 132-494-5278. And I don't think there is anybody. Yeraida, is there anybody?
Madam Mayor, there are no callers on the line.
Okay, thank you. All right, we move now to the consent calendar. And we have a little change. Before we begin the business portion of the meeting, I want to announce a slight change in procedure. For the sake of ease and efficiency, I've been making main motions during virtual meetings. Now that we are better at this process, most of the time, and more comfortable with the technology, we are going to return to the practice of the deputy mayor doing the motions. Main motions by the deputy mayor concerning agenda items, suspense items, executive sessions, and consent calendars need not be seconded, and in many cases, we will continue to vote on these items via unanimous consent. However, all other motions, such as amendments, must be seconded when required under Robert's rules. So we're going to go to that new process. I am hearing some background noise, so if you're not on mute, please do, and I would recognize that Councilor Fay is here and has joined the meeting. Ms. Fay, do you want to just say here for the record?
Yes, here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Davidoff, to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Without objection, I move that we suspend the rules to open the agenda and add the following items. Resolution concerning state filing for school construction grant for all high school, which shall be designated item 7P. Resolution concerning state filing for school construction grant for Northville Elementary School, which shall be designated item 7Q. Resolution concerning state filing for school construction grant for Webster Hill Elementary School, which shall be designated item 7R. And resolution concerning state filing for school construction grant for Sedgwick Middle School, which shall be designated item 7S.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Mr. Hart, would you like to please summarize and explain these items?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. These items all relate to school construction grants, as Deputy Mayor has elaborated in the resolution itself. The school construction grant program, it's a longstanding grant program provided by the state. These 4 projects actually had been previously submitted and approved by the council, but later on, the state office determined that we needed 4 separate resolutions as opposed to 1 consolidated resolution. The town share of the cost of each project is budgeted in our capital improvement program. So this is something of a technical fix, if you will.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. So if there is no objection, I'll ask, is there any objection to adding the items to the agenda? Okay. Seeing no objection, the motion is adopted and the items are added to the agenda. Mr. Davidoff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Without objection, I move that we place items 4A, 4B, 7B, 7C, 7D, 7E, 7F, 7G, 7H, 7I, 7J, 7K, 7L, 7M, 7N, 7O, 7P, 7Q, 7R, and 7S on consent.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Is there any objection to placing any of these items on the consent calendar? Okay, seeing no objection, these items are now placed on consent. Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Without objection, I move adoption of the items on the consent calendar.
Is there any objection to this adoption? Okay, there being no objection, the items on the consent calendar are adopted. Now we are all ready to Town Manager's report. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Point of order, did you approve the minutes already? If you did, I apologize for missing that.
I was on consent. Mr. Hart.
Oh, did you want to go to approve the minutes next, then to the staff reports?
No, the minutes were on consent calendar.
Oh, got it. I'm sorry, I missed that. Thank you. All right, so I do have a couple of items I'd like to report on this evening. First, under council business and meetings, our standing committees are meeting again, as you all know. The Public Works and Facilities Committee will meet at 8 a.m. this Thursday, the 28th. That will be a virtual meeting. All these will be virtual meetings, actually. And our Community Planning and Economic Development Committee will meet at 6 p.m. on February 4th. And the Town Council will meet again with a public hearing scheduled for 7 p.m. on February 9th. I do have an item now that I'd like to spend a little time on, Mayor, and that concerns the COVID vaccine registration and how the town is working to supplement the efforts of our West Hartford Bloomfield Health District. And I did put this report on board docs for you to take a look at when you have time to do so. But first of all, as I'm sure most of us know, Connecticut residents age 75 and older are now eligible to receive the vaccine under Phase 1B. The statewide system does have some challenges, and it does take time and patience to navigate. So despite these obstacles, we want to stress the importance of getting the vaccine. And we encourage everyone to keep in mind three things with the registration process. Number one, be patient. Number two, be persistent. And number three, ask for help if needed. For all of you out there who may be younger than 75, now is the time to reach out to your parents, to your grandparents, to your friends and neighbors and offer your assistance. For most, the online registration takes 15 minutes or less. However, some of our seniors need a trusted person to help them get registered. There are several places to receive the vaccine. Most do require some form of registration. You first must register with the Connecticut Department of Public Health and then complete the health questionnaire and make an appointment. There are two ways to do this, online or by phone. The best way to self-register is to do it online at ct.gov/COVID vaccine. ct.gov/COVID vaccine. While this method is quicker, you may need help to navigate through the process, especially if you're not as familiar with using a computer. To register, you will need an email. If you do not have an email account, you'll need to create one for this purpose, and the system does not allow you to use someone else's email address. So this can be challenging for someone who's not as experienced in using the technology. The health questionnaire will ask you for your name, for your date of birth, for your list of medications, for a home phone, as well as a cell phone if you have one. Once you have entered all of your health information, you can then choose from any of the area clinics. The second way to register for the vaccine is by phone, and that's by calling Connecticut Vaccine Appointment Line 877-918-2224. That's 877-918-2224. And the phone system is designed to help those who have limited access to technology or who may have a language disability or some other barrier. And the helpline is open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. It does offer a callback option when all lines are busy. And many people are reporting long wait times. So it's important, very important to be patient. If you register through the phone line, you will receive your vaccination at Rentschler Field in East Hartford. In addition to Rentschler Field and our West Hartford Bloomfield Health District clinics at Town Hall, there are two other locations nearby offering vaccines, UConn Hospital and Hartford Hospital. UConn Hospital does require an online account. Hartford Hospital requires what's called a MyChart Plus account. If you do not have an account, you can create one through their websites. More locations are coming on soon, such as Trinity Health and CVS and Walgreens. So what's the town of West Hartford doing to assist in this process? We are planning to support our community and provide information about the registration process for the foreseeable future. We see us involved in this effort with the health district for months to come. We're allocating staff resources to assist the health district, as well as developing a hotline for information about COVID-19 vaccinations. The staff we will have answering this hotline number will be able to provide you with updated information about how to register for your vaccination. This hotline should be up and running by early February or next week. We're also exploring plans right now to provide the health district with technology to utilize what's called an electronic health record system, similar to what your medical provider uses. And that would greatly simplify the district's appointment process. We're also sending a step-by-step information guide on how to create what's called a VAMS profile. That is the registration process, the online registration process for the vaccine. And we'll be sending that to all of our senior housing facilities. And the management at those facilities will also help their residents. So while we're hopeful for better solutions at the state and federal level, we all need to be patient. Vaccines are arriving weekly, but not quite yet in the quantities that are needed or requested. This week, for example, the health district requested 1,000 doses. They did receive 500. However, good progress, very good progress is being made here in Connecticut. Governor Lamont reported yesterday that 27% of people over the age of 75 in Connecticut have received their first dose. That is fabulous. Connecticut continues to rank in the top 4 states for administering the vaccine. Our health district staff have begun to administer the second dose to our first responders. Our public health nurses have trained our fire department paramedics on how to vaccinate at the weekly clinic. That's another benefit for the town by having these trained EMT and paramedics. At some point, we are hoping that our paramedics will be able to vaccinate homebound residents. And under Mayor Cantor's leadership, we are seeking authorization from the State Department of Health to enable us to do that. Lastly, ITN Central Connecticut, located here at West Hartford Town Hall, they are offering friendly, affordable transportation for elderly and visually impaired residents that need a ride to a vaccine clinic. So if you need a ride, we can help you with that. Please call 860-508-9847. Again, that's 860-508-9847 for this service. Mayor, that completes my report. I know it was somewhat lengthy, but a very important item to review there. I'm happy to take any questions that you and other council members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. I just want to follow up and thank you and town staff, and especially our health district director, Amy Kraus, on her leadership and commitment to serving this community. I cannot tell you how anxious people are to help. And staff is ready. We had a wonderful meeting to coordinate all the efforts, and we want to have a long-standing support network in the town to assist our residents in getting the vaccinations. But obviously we're limited in what we get, and so we are ready to expand and to support, but that will come. Again, we urge your patience, and this is a time when community leans on each other. If you know of a senior in your neighborhood, and a relative even, whether they live in town or they don't, ask if you can help them register. It is daunting. I walked through my 92-year-old mother on this, and she's waiting for her second vaccine, but it is a very challenging process, multiple password changes, and it's just a lot for a senior. And my mom is very, she's very computer savvy too. So anyway, so with that, I really urge you all to reach out to people that you know, check on them, and help them through the process if at all possible. Any questions for Mr. Hart? Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Hart, I just have one quick question, and this is just based on some of the either news reports or things that I've seen and heard in terms of weight. And I don't know if it applies here in town, but of those staff that are being trained to issue the vaccine or to provide the vaccine, in terms of a coordinated schedule, are there a certain number of staff at once that are given the vaccine to members of the public? So in other words, if there's a wait line, do we have 2 people issuing it at a time, or how many do we have?
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Thank you, Councilor Blanks, for your good question. We certainly have more than 2. We have several. I do not have an exact count. The thing that takes time is registering for the vaccine to begin with. So sometimes people will show up at one of our clinics and they haven't been fully registered yet, and we need to assist them. Once that process is complete, they can actually receive the vaccine in a relatively timely manner. We have roughly 10 public health nurses and then several paramedics who are trained as well. But when you do receive this vaccine, it's somewhat different from getting your flu vaccine. You need to stay with us a good 15 minutes or so that we can observe to see whether or not you have any type of adverse reaction. So, you know, from my perspective, I think, again, once someone gets over that registration hurdle, they can move through the clinic in a relatively expeditious manner.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Ms. Blanks, anything further?
So I'm all set. Back to you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Thank you, Mr. Hart. Any further questions? I can't see. Oh, I know Ms. Kerrigan, you had a question, and I can't see everybody's. They're going in and out, a couple of you. So if you do have a question, please let me know. Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you. The unfortunate fire that we had in town, there was a fundraiser that was set up. I've had individuals ask me if there's any place to donate articles of clothing or appliances, that type of stuff. Do you know if there's anything happening like that?
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Hart?
Matt Hart, Town Manager. No, Councilor Kerrigan, I am not aware of that as of yet. I am familiar with the one fundraiser that has been set up that Mayor Cantor mentioned through Friends of Feeney. I will look into that. I will look into that and see if there's something that's going to be established or something that the town can assist with.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Ms. Kerrigan, anything further?
No, thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Hart? I'm looking at my phone for a text, and I'm looking for hands. I don't see any. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hart. And we will go now to Corporation Counsel, Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Earlier today, Governor Lamont announced that he signed a declaration extending the declaration, the declaration of a state of emergency until April 20th. This was expected, and I don't expect it to have any material effect on the town, particularly since the governor has really slowed down in issuing executive orders, particularly since the legislature went back into session. Other than that, Madam Mayor, I have nothing else for my formal report, and I'm pleased to say that we will not require any executive session this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge. Are there any questions for Mr. Dodge? No questions about the end date of the executive orders for the governor? No. Okay. All right, we will move on. All right. Number 6, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of an ordinance authorizing an appropriation of $365 million to fund all or a portion of the town's unfunded actuarial accrued liability with respect to the town's employee pension plan and authorizing the issuance of general obligation pension bonds in the amount not to exceed $365 million to finance such appropriation.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. I'm going to start calling on, first, I don't know if there's any questions. This was subject to a public hearing directly before this council meeting. And I want to extend a very big thank you to the staff, Mr. Hart's leadership, Mr. Privatera's constant and professional attention to this, and the team that is here with us today. This has been a really, we've really used some wonderful professionals, and I'm so grateful for their leadership and their advice. I want to thank Becky Seelman from Milliman, Bill Lindsay, our financial advisor, Matt Ritter, our bond counsel, and Chris Kashmar from our investment advisor, DeMayo Schneider. And again, for Peter for his commitment to looking at this, testing it, and it was a bit of stop and starts. We looked at this a number of years ago. It wasn't the right time. It wasn't right for us then. But now we believe it is the right time. I also want to thank our pension board, the volunteers and residents that really bring incredible caring and expertise to their jobs and steward the pension plan. We're very lucky to have such knowledgeable, enlightened, and committed individuals, residents. I want to give a special thanks to the chair, Nancy Dean. I also want to thank the Finance Committee for doing a lot of the coordination and some early vetting of this. You are all very appreciated. Chairman Davidoff, Mr. Sweeney, and Ms. Fay, I appreciate all of your input and work on this. I'm going to say a few comments and then I'm going to go through the council. And although this analysis has been very complicated and long, there's been enormous amounts of time put into this and a lot of input from a very strong team. A lot of the concept, as much as this has been complicated to analyze and talk about and educate people about, the concept of adopting this new financing model is not complicated. We have a long-term existing pension liability, and as people live longer, this past liability continues to grow. The town's contribution to this past pension liability has grown year after year after year. It has been the largest driver of our budget increases for the past 20 years. For the same reason, it has been the largest driver of our residents' tax increases. In 2013, the contribution to this pension plan was $1.2 million. Now, in 2022, for the fiscal year, it is $27 million. We just want that to sink in for a minute. 1.2 million in 2003, and in 2022, $27 million. This is one of the major reasons why our budgets went up and taxes in turn have gone up. We have an opportunity right now to make a financing decision that saves the town and taxpayers significant money. This means year after year savings for taxpayers for the next 25 years. These projections are financially conservative and have realistic projections. We also have added a unique and financially sound element by adding a reserve, established by using currently budgeted pension payments to protect against market fluctuations over the life of the bond. This isn't something we have to do. This is something we want to do because it makes sense. It fully funds our pension obligation. The plan contains realistic projections and has protections from market downturns and periods of economic challenges due to the unique reserve component. And most importantly, it saves our taxpayers real and significant money. Realistic and conservative projections anticipate a savings of $440 million in present value of payments and a $60 million reserve at the end of 25 years that can be used to offset other pension payments or other employee benefits. Let me repeat that. This is a $200 million impact on an average scenario case with these conservative projections. Making an important and frankly transformational decision like this is challenging, but please understand how much this has been researched and vetted. It is strategic and beneficial to the future of our town. Given the historically low interest rates that we may never see again, now is the time to make this change. And with that, I will go to Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Tonight is like bringing me back to high school or college when I feel really prepared to take a test or playing a game after a lot of practice and going through things over and over again. This decision is not one that the town has taken lightly. And kudos to Mayor Cantor, who I think this was the first thing that when I came on the council, she talked to me about. And the team that went into this, to the bond counsel, Matt, to Pierre, to Matt, everyone that worked on this issue. This wasn't something that we just did overnight. And today I feel extremely prepared. We've had 5 or 6 different public conversations about this. We've had different group thinking situations where we could pull out different information and different thought process. And to Mayor Cantor, she has taken my concerns into question early on and addressed them. And I think today we stand here, looking to get rid of one of the largest costs to the town, as Mayor Cantor just mentioned, $27 million, and getting rid of dealing with this issue for a long period of time. And as the town, one of the biggest things that we struggle with when we go through the budget is costs that just come out of nowhere. We're dealing with a trash crisis, stuff that we have to deal with. That cost is spiraling out of control. We can't control that. Utility costs, and now pandemics. This is the right move for us. This is the right time. Again, kudos to the team that put together all of the background for this. Also, just kudos to people. I think one of the big things that I've learned during this pandemic is patience, and I think today is a great example of the patience of this financial team and waiting for the right moment to make this move. So, with that, kudos to the entire team putting this together, and I will be supporting the measure.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Ms. Fay, I'm going to you as a member of the Finance Committee next, and then I'll go to Mr. Davidoff.
Okay, hold on one second. Thank you very much. A lot of work has been put on this, and I don't want to repeat all the kudos for the team, and both internally and externally. I know that these are huge projects with of stochastic runs and lots of analysis. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate the team being available to answer my questions offline and in a group. So I think my comments, I'm hoping they'll be helpful to people. I in prior lives kind of dealt with this day to day. I ran retirement, pension, and annuity businesses for the better part of, I don't know, 30 years or so. So I'd like to say that my main concern is on the risk profile, because to me, the drivers and the assumptions and the moving pieces really do mirror the variable annuity business with longevity and market risk and interest rate risk and guaranteed risk. That's the problem with pensions, is that we're guaranteeing something in the future and we don't know what it's going to be. People retire at different times and they put different overtime in and things like that. So there's always a variable cost to that. So not to correct people who aren't as technical with the subject matter, because it is complicated. I will definitely give that. We're not dismissing, or this liability is not going away. I think people mostly address the asset side, and Mr. Lyons, I'd like to thank you for reminding me of Republican values. That was interesting. But I think there's some holes in here that could present problems. So on the asset side, of course, you're always going to take a bet of a 6.25% return against a 3% obligation. I mean, that's like how mortgages work. If your house appreciated 6.5 or 6.25% every year and you had a 3% mortgage, you'd be ecstatic because you'd be leveraged and it would support that. Now, one thing, and I'm not going to go real deep and talk too technically, but one thing that concerns me too is I asked for the beta on the portfolio, the investment portfolio, but I was given the standard deviation, which I think is close enough, but that's over 10.6. So that means with our 6.25 scenario on investment performance, we can earn, on the plus side, 16.25 with a standard deviation of 10. And of course, then we could lose 4.25% at the same time. So I think the assumptions, I wish it came true that it was going to be a steady 6.25 and it's steady 3% payout, and the reserve account would accommodate everything, but it's going to be bumpy. I mean, the stock market goes up and down, interest rates rise and fall, and real estate, which is part of the portfolio, certainly changes. So I'm really, really concerned about that. The one thing on the liability side, which is what we're obligated to pay these pensioners out at a certain time, that's got a lot of risk to it. So we don't know when people are going to retire. We don't know how long they're going to be vested. We don't know how much overtime and things are going to be in there. There's disintermediation risk and a couple of factors. And what that means is that someone who's married to a much younger spouse, someone who's 20 or 30 years younger, they could get a joint payout. And, you know, by choosing that, that's going to put us at more risk for the guarantee. Now, the liability side, if you look at some of the spreadsheets, I don't know if they're supplied, but when we, in the do nothing scenario, where at one point we were over 100% funded, I forget, early 2000s, I believe. And then we did make payments. And that happens, the state's in the same situation. Companies have done that too, but we've gotten to a point where we're woefully underfunded and we need to address this. And I'm not sure this is the best mechanism right now because of the risk that I just described. The liability is still going to grow. So we have to be prepared for that. And the discount rate could change and a lot of other things could change in that. So I don't like to see the town put itself at more risk. The adverse selection and the things on the liability side is what's really caused the VA variable annuity industry to contract. And a lot of people have gotten out of the business entirely because of this profile of risk, the guarantees on the payout side. So I am absolutely positively concerned. It's not going to work out. I can tell you at the deterministic scenario, which is everything works linear and that just goes like this and your payout goes like that. That's not what's going to happen in real life. So, you know, the only way, there's some things that I'd like to consider. Now with this exercise, all my answers were answered, or my questions were answered satisfactorily. So I think this exercise was done well. And I don't have questions. I just have comments. I mean, the savings are back end loaded. So in the early years, they're going to be very, very modest and they're going to grow over time. So I think we're still going to have some trouble making the ADEC and some of our other things. I'd like to see a more holistic approach, to be honest with you. I'd like to see, and we've talked about this, but, you know, freezing the pension so we know what that liability is. I know only a small percentage of our pensioners, I think it was 3%, are on payout mode, so a buyout probably wouldn't work. But I think we really need to do a lot of work on the liability side and drive that down because that's something that can always come back to haunt us. So I think the work was done fine. I'm not questioning the work and I'm not shooting holes in the analysis. I'm just questioning some of the bad cases that can happen. And there's something that, you know, I talked about this earlier in one of the sessions, you know, the black swan scenario where, you know, if the 1930s depression recreated itself, God forbid, that would put us in a worse position. So I do have concerns, and unfortunately, I'm not able to support this proposition as outlined.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I usually say when we adopt a budget, West Hartford's brightest days still lie ahead, and I firmly believe that. I like to take an optimistic view with respect to our town. Tonight, I will be supporting this resolution because I believe it's a strategic approach to address the town's unfunded pension liability, while at the same time meeting the best interests of the town and its taxpayers. I'm quite appreciative of the efforts of the town manager, Matt Hart, and finance director, Peter Privatera, who have assembled a team of quality experts to examine the issuance of pension obligation bonds. Further, it should be noted for the record that the council has had several interactive workshops with our outside financial consultants to address any concerns councilors may have had. The intent of these meetings was to educate, explore the options, and to meet the necessary due diligence requirements for the action that we will be undertaking this evening. I would like to express my gratitude to my colleagues for being engaged in the discussions on this significant issue. Also, I'd like to commend Mayor Cantor for her strong leadership and her perseverance to get us to tonight's decision. In sum, after learning, listening, and being engaged in the discussion, I have reached the one conclusion, and that is this is a very thoughtful and innovative approach that will help keep West Hartford on solid financial footing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. So those were our members of our finance committee who we really obviously look at the budget and have that. And so I thank you all for your input. Now we're going to go in reverse order of alphabetical. And Mr. Williams is a birthday boy tonight. We all wish him a very happy birthday, and he will go first. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you for the birthday wishes. I appreciate that. And thanks for the staff and all our outside assistants and the mayor in pursuing this and looking at an issue that has been an albatross for our budget. For me, it's a very tough issue. And as other members of the council have said, it's one we've looked at repeatedly and over years and in different contexts. But there's still a few issues that give me pause. The first is that at its core, what we're doing is we're turning a soft liability into a hard liability. And it will limit the flexibility that our council has to be flexible moving forward, particularly in the out years. Second, I have reservations that this will ultimately move towards, or the movement towards pension obligation bonds will result in a savings. Our yearly budgets are growing exponentially, and every year the budget's growth devours savings realized through prior policy decisions or grand list growth. And you all know that the reason for that, in my view, is that the budget is fundamentally unsustainable. And yes, the pension, as the mayor mentioned, the pension funding is one of the factors concerning West Hartford's budget trajectory and its unsustainability. But it's one of several. And I'm concerned that by proceeding with the pension obligation bonds, future councils will be under the false impression that our budget has found stability without addressing some of the other cost drivers. And the result will be that the town's budget will grow and any savings earned via the pension obligation bonds will be consumed by spending elsewhere. And there was sort of a reference to that earlier in the public hearing. So, and let us not forget sort of how we got into this issue in the first place. The town council, both parties, I know that's always sort of a dispute by people who have served before us, but both parties underfunded the pension fund in the early 2000s. And now here we're voting on the idea that by moving towards a pension obligation bond, the town council, future town councils are going to honor the framework that we're setting in place now, the hard liability that we're setting in place now in order to make sure that the savings will be realized over the course of the, this program. And I don't think that's going to happen. The third concern I have is that proceeding with the pension obligation bonds does not get the town out of the pension model, which Ms. Fay referenced, which I believe the town should do, as we've discussed. And I'm also concerned that there's going to be some unintended consequences of this policy. I believe that the town's various collective bargaining units will see the town's movement towards a pension obligation bond model as a stabilization of the budget, providing them with more leverage in contract negotiations. And I'm concerned that arbitrators will share that view. And finally, this move, as has been acknowledged repeatedly, has enormous risk. We're living in unprecedented times with pandemic, historic national debt, and the future, of course, is entirely unpredictable. And so moving to a hard liability from a soft one in that context, again, gives me pause. And so those are the thoughts that I have this evening. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Winograd.
Ben Winograd, Town Council. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for recognizing me, and more importantly, thank you for your leadership on this. As Liam mentioned, but the first thing you said to him was POB. Maybe the second thing you said to me, and like I said, I went through a lot of study and your patience, and being the advocate for this, and then pulling back when conditions weren't right was really inspirational. And I just want to thank you for clearly being the person, the leader on this council, the person who understands this stuff better than anybody. And you've shown that over and over and over again by being hearing disagreements and being able to answer them and bringing us, most of us, along. And I really want to thank you for that. I had a few other comments I wanted to make more generally, but in honor of Chris's birthday, I actually think it would be good to respond directly to what he said, because he actually made some interesting points. And so rather than my prepared remarks, I want to try to take those on. And one thing I think that is true, it is largely moving from a soft liability to a hard liability, or certainly a harder one. And you portray that as if that were sort of a bad thing, that we're reducing the flexibility of future councils. And yet we both acknowledge that part of the problem has been, whether you like pensions or not, I happen to like them, but there's an obligation to fund them. And there's an unfortunate tendency among politicians to take a short-term gain from underfunding a pension rather than looking for long-term. And that is the opposite of what we're doing. We're taking a long-term view, and the fact that we're not going to see immediate gains in our expectation, and for the long-term ones, ultimately benefiting the town, is, again, I think, part of the point, that yes, and we're making them hard so that we will actually pay our debt. Because, again, that's what we're talking about. We have a debt. Whether it was created by a pension or anything else, we have a debt and we should pay it back. And that would seem to be a fairly conservative principle. But I hate to use that term, because I actually think it's to be partisan, a Democratic Party principle to pay off debts rather than to push them down the road. But I think certainly we all agree that to be fiscally responsible, we should pay off our debts. And I think that's what we're doing here. And the other just, you worry that the fact that we're putting our fiscal house in order will cause future councils to overspend. But it's kind of a circular reason. I mean, isn't it good in itself to pay off our debt? And the fact that somebody else you fear will then overpay it, well, at least we're giving them the opportunity, and we can have that debate then. Better to be healthy than not healthy. And to the last point, you make the same point with the unions taking advantage of the fiscal health of the town. I mean, to some extent, you're right. It's better to be an employee of a town that is fiscally responsible and doing better. And sure, they would try to take advantage. Certainly I would, of a well-run town than a poorly run town. But that's a good thing, because it's also better to work for a well-run town. It's also better to live in one. And I think that's what we're setting up, is having a place that has done a better job of tackling this debt of ours. So I take your points. I think they are a good analysis to some extent of what we're doing, but I come to the opposite conclusion, which is that yes, we're putting our house in order. We are paying back our debts in a very informed and safe way. And all the analysis we've been able to do, and that our experts are showing us, and that and our residents and everything else, I think that we're doing the safe thing, and it will put us in better shape. So with that, I'd like to again thank the entire team. It has been an education. I know I've heard more about POBs than I ever thought I would, and I appreciate all the people who've educated me on those. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Ms. Kerrigan?
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. As a point of clarification to John Lyons during the public comments, I think in effort to appeal to Republicans, he claimed that they had a tenant to save money. And I got to say, and I love John Lyons dearly, I take exception to that, because I do think the Democrats get a bad rap. We're not the party of spendthrift. I think the difference is how the Democrats choose to spend money. And I think we keep our promises, and we try our best to take care of essential workers. And I think that's really important, how we spend money. It's not, we don't throw money around, but we do choose what's important and what's valuable to the people in our town and in our state. On that note, I do want to thank Mayor Sherry Cantor, who, as everyone has said, has been working on this for years. She is taking a problem that every town in America, every state in America is facing, and choosing to do something about it. And I applaud her leadership for that. There are towns that have tried this and it didn't work out well because they were already in bad shape. There are towns that have chosen to do this and it worked out really well. And I believe that's where we are going to be, because of all the professionals who have shared their answers, their presentations, so that novices, this is not my strong suit. This is probably the most painful vote, because I do take all of these votes very seriously, but I do want to do right by the residents. I spent a lot of time talking to residents in the town who work in the field of finances, that understand POBs and investments. And every time they sent me some questions, I immediately shot it to Matt, and he shot it to Peter, and promptly we got a response. And every single answer helped me to understand, oh, this is a conservative risk. It's not a wild and crazy out there risk. It is something that we have to do. Or we can just say, well, let's just keep raising taxes till no one can afford to be in this town. So basically, that's the choices we're making. And I think that this is the smarter choices. You know, oftentimes in life, in my life, it's sort of a leap of faith. I don't know this. I know other things really well. This is not something I know really well, though I know it a lot better than I did before. But I'm trusting those that know this really well, like Peter Prevotera, who really understands the finances of this, like Sherry Cantor, who's been around the finances of our town forever, sort of relying on their expertise and trusting that their best interest is in our town, is in our residents. So I do recall sitting with Ron Van Winkle a long time ago when he was the manager, and I was trying to understand the finances of how towns work. And I remember sort of flippantly saying to him, I can't believe we don't invest some of our money. We would be in such better shape. And, you know, we can only be super, super conservative for so long before we're going to start going backwards. I take a lot of comfort in knowing that we're going to have a strong reserve. I take a lot of comfort in knowing that it's well vetted. And I think it sure beats the alternative, which is either to do nothing or to keep raising taxes. So I want to thank all the presenters. I want to thank Sherry Cantor, Mayor Cantor, for her leadership. Because, you know, that's when you're doing things different, you know, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it doesn't. And I do believe that this is one of those times that it's going to work. And other mayors may not have been willing to take this on in this fashion. And I think that you will see other towns follow us. So it's always good to be a leader. So thank you. And I certainly will be supporting this.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Gold.
Thank you, Mayor Cantor. And through you, I now know what it feels like to go near the end as opposed to ceviche raw at the beginning. So I'm the opposite of Chris. Happy birthday, by the way, formally and on the record. I do want to thank the entire team for the efforts in putting this plan in motion. It's been very thoughtful, been tremendous analysis done, and I certainly applaud all their efforts. You know, when I first mentioned myself, I had mentioned the possibility of pension obligation bonds to Mr. Hart, one of our first meetings. The beginning of my term, I felt that this was a viable option to help with our very underfunded pension directly to the town. During my campaign, I addressed these issues and hoped the town would move in this direction so it would help to alleviate the escalating budget and begin the process of stabilizing and reducing town spending. This would have a direct impact, obviously, on every taxpayer's wallet. If we do nothing, as I've had many conversations with Mr. Hart, Mr. Privitera, and others, the pension contributions will continue to increase annually at an alarming rate. It'll create a financial calamity for the town, in my mind, and we'll see an increase in taxes year after year as the budget continues to grow in order to fund the pension. We can't just stand by and watch this happen, as our town budget will continuously increase. We're really now at a crossroads, as I see it, making it a decision that will have a significant impact on our town's future. Interest rates are at an all-time low. Extensive analysis, as we've heard by town staff, Peter Privitera and Matt Hart in particular, shows that the town will realize a tremendous savings over the life of this process of approximately $150 million. We're going to have a pension bond reserve, a lockbox of sorts to be used in the case of a significant downturn in the market. It will be funded, initially in the millions. There are sound financial decisions being made here, and I applaud the efforts of everybody who's involved. We can't rely on this alone, however. Coupled with this decision is the need to take an honest look at our pension plan and make appropriate decisions on its future for all new hires. Exploring alternatives is necessary, and I'm pleased to know that this will be part of the overall strategy moving forward. I'm excited for these opportunities that will enable our town to have more flexibility, create a positive fiscal outlook, and ultimately make our town more affordable for all its taxpayers for many years to come. Thank you very much. I will be supporting this resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor. And I know what it feels like, Councilor Williams. When you're last, everything has already been said. So I'm going to keep my comments brief so we don't belabor this any further. But I do have to say, I would definitely like to thank and recognize Mayor Cantor, because this has been an issue that has been on her mind, has been discussed, has been a concern of hers for quite some time. She'd often say, we really need to do something about that. We really need to address the POB. And early on, I was like, POB, everybody who's in the field and has the expertise, they like to throw around these acronyms and just assume that everybody else knows what you're talking about. She goes, oh, the pension obligation bonds. I was like, oh, okay. So I too had to do my research, but I must say that big kudos, huge kudos goes out to this team that I'm looking at, because you have all these years of experience and expertise, and the way how you presented all of this information and educated everybody, it was just like secondhand, like basic math. And all of you were just tossing around all these terms that when I got off the calls, I would have to go on Google or look them up or speak to people in my family who had the financial expertise as well. So I've got to say, with the few, or many, I should say, not few, many meetings and workshops that you've provided, I just want to thank you, because I know it didn't come easy. It takes a lot of your time and hard work to go back and to research some of the questions that we've all asked you, and all of your responses have been spot on. So I agree with the majority of our responses that were discussed. This plan has gone unfunded for years. And here we are, how many years later, and it has ballooned. And so to do nothing would be very irresponsible. And as many of you have stated, that the rates are low. So we do need to take advantage of that. It would be a real pity if we knew the rates were low and we just decided that we're going to wait another year or another two, and then we'd be kicking ourselves in the rear and says, we should have done, or you know what, we could have. So I think it's brave. I really think it's brave that we're bringing this issue to the forefront. Many of you, especially our illustrious mayor, knew that we would probably get some resistance, but she forged ahead anyway and really went to bat so that we could all understand what's in front of us and why it's important to do what is here tonight. And so with all of that said, I do feel comfortable with all of the education that I've received up to this point in terms of supporting this. So I will be supporting this tonight. Thank you. Back to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. All right. Again, I thank you to the team for your sharing your expertise and your patience with us. For some of you, it's been years. And to the council for investing lots of time in making a very important strategic, I think, transformational decision on the future financial condition of our town. So with that, we will go to roll call, Ms. LeBreau.
Ms. Blanks.
Yes.
Ms. Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff.
Yes.
Ms. Fay.
No.
Mr. Gold.
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Yes.
Mr. Winograd.
Yes.
And Mr. Williams.
No.
It's adopted 7-2. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. Okay, B, Mr. Mr. Davidoff, could you please read item 6B?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of an ordinance establishing a general obligation pension bonds reserve fund.
Second.
Thank you. We will, again, the discussion has all happened. This is part of the whole model for the pension obligation bonds. So we will, I think if there's anybody that wants to speak to this, please raise your hand. If you don't, we will go to roll call. Is there anybody that would like to speak separately to this? Okay. All right. Roll call, Ms. LeBreau?
Ms. Blanks,
Yes.
Ms. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff,
Yes.
Ms. Fay,
No.
Mr. Gold,
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan,
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney,
Yes.
Mr. Winograd,
Yes.
and Mr. Williams.
No.
It passes 7-2.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. 7, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move adoption of a resolution condemning hate and extremism.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. I'm going to just say a little bit about this, and I know there's a couple people listening in that I want to thank for their leadership. I know Stephen Ginsburg, the director of the Connecticut Anti-Defamation League, who forwarded this to me through the national organization to encourage local municipalities to take action and to condemn hate and racism and work very intentionally on making our communities better and then making our states better and making our nation better. I also want to give a thank you, and I don't know if she's on, I was on her council meeting last night, but to Mayor Brown from Bloomfield, we decided to do this sort of hand in hand because together as communities, we are stronger, and I'll tell you a little action that we'll be engaging in too. So I also want to start by saying tomorrow is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and a day that we read the name of the 6 million Jews that were murdered and perished. So it's a very solemn time, and the true cost of hate, as many people see and know, too many people see and know, is serious. And it's not, and we have to fight it every day. You don't do something and then shake your hands and say, we're done. It's constant. ADL is the leading national anti-hate organization founded in 1913 and has been a resource and a leader in educating and protecting justice and fair treatment to all. This resolution was again distributed nationally to state and local governments, recognizing that although there are challenges that we face on a national level or state level, these issues rely on local actions and commitments and intentions. Bloomfield adopting last night makes us a partner. Mayor Brown and I will be participating in a panel discussion creating peace and racial justice in our communities on Friday night at Emmanuel Synagogue, virtually at Emmanuel Synagogue at 7:30, sponsored by the ADL. Recognizing this resolution recognizes the seriousness of anti-government extremism, white supremacy, racism, anti-Semitism, misogyny, Islamophobia, anti-LGBTQ plus hate, embolism, and all hateful speech and bias motivate violent actions in our community. It recognizes the danger of extremist conspiracy theories, misinformation, and disinformation that undermine our democratic institutions. And what we saw come to a culmination on January 6th, trying to overturn a democratic election, and all the processes that result in increases in threats and incidents of violence. This resolution calls on us to commit to rejecting hate speech and actions and countering hate and extremism by all means, including education and prevention, condemnation, and accountability, and urging our community to champion our country's democratic values. As elected leaders, this is our responsibility. We can't look to other people to do it, nor can we give it up it's every single day that we hold the mantle and we move forward, protecting each and every individual's right in our communities. We're committed to the safety and well-being of all of our citizens. Is there anybody else that would like to make a comment on this resolution? And then we will go through a roll call. Mr. Gold.
Thank you, Mayor Cantor, and through you to all. Personally, I actually think we've addressed these issues numerous times, and to continue to do so detracts from what we've already said and done. We spoke about the public health crisis and systemic racism. We spoke about Juneteenth, what it espouses. You and I both issued a joint statement most recently about the occurrences in the Capitol, just to name a few. I was hoping we could approach the division and attack in a more positive way. The resolution, as stated, denounces quite a bit. I appreciate that, but I think we can achieve a narrative that helps to heal. I also have concerns that we are further moving away from our town council objective, which is to address town issues. Continuing to address national issues detracts from that mission, in my mind. Please don't misinterpret this and what I'm saying to suggest that I do not denounce hate and extremism. I do unequivocally. I abhor it. But I think we need to refocus on issues that affect our town directly. If we want to address hate, it should be specific to our town. We just mentioned the Holocaust Remembrance tomorrow. How about a resolution that would condemn all forms of anti-Semitism? We've had multiple attacks in West Hartford specific to that issue, but I haven't heard much. My feeling now is I think we need to move on, take our President Biden's directive and lead, and begin the process of healing our town so that our town will become stronger. I believe this is our job as West Hartford's elected leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Mr. Williams, did you have your hand up?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Appreciate it. I did want to make a few comments on the resolution. The resolution states correctly that, quote, each of our elected leaders has the ability and obligation to promote inclusiveness, celebrate diversity, work to ensure equitable opportunities in all major facets of society, prevent the spread of misinformation and disinformation, and reject hate and bias in all forms, and should set a positive example for their constituents in this regard. And this statement, end quote, is absolutely true. Our leaders need to be consistent and candid and tell constituents the whole story. If we as a town council really want to take a unifying stance against hate, bigotry, and extremism, we have to look at the entire landscape of our society. We have to look inwards at ourselves. We have to have the strength, accountability, and humility to look at the whole picture. And I believe that's how you unify people. So let me say at the outset, I denounce bigotry in all forms, denounce white supremacy, any sort of political extremism which uses violence, any sort of political action which seeks to bully via violence or otherwise a political opponent into silence or submission. This resolution specifically calls out right-wing extremism. And in case it isn't obvious, right-wing extremism and bigotry should be denounced. The resolution does not go on to call it any other political extremism or violence as I read it, or that we've had this year. The inference being that extremism and bigotry, which the resolution seeks to denounce, comes from only the right side of the political spectrum and with a political motive. And for this proposition, the resolution relied on the Anti-Defamation League's 2019 report. It's right here, I read it. The resolution points out that the Anti-Defamation League reports that domestic extremism killed at least 42 people in 2019, which was, according to them, 90% by right-wing extremists. But to me, what the resolution doesn't point out is the whole picture. And it's sad that I have to keep saying this, or that we have to keep addressing this issue. But the whole picture is that America is on fire. Violence and hate abounds in our political and public square. At least 11 Americans were killed while participating in political demonstrations this year. If you read their stories, they're horrific. In addition to those killed while demonstrating, at least 14 fellow Americans were killed in other incidents linked to political unrest. I'm sure you've all heard the story of David Dorn. Another tragic loss was a young man in Seattle's self-declared Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. He was a young man. And in fact, in 2020, the United States experienced the largest single one-year increase in homicides and murder since the country started keeping such records. Listen to these stats. Lubbock, Texas, Republican mayor saw a 100% increase in murder this year. Madison, Wisconsin, Democrat mayor saw a 400% increase. Omaha, Nebraska, Republican mayor saw a 120% increase. Boston, Democrat mayor saw a 54% increase. Bipartisan issue all over the place, and on it goes. The death cannot be divorced from our leadership and the policies that they have implemented. This year, we have seen what we would all think was unimaginable, from police stations burned to the ground all the way to the Capitol siege. And just look what Antifa is doing in Portland, terrorizing the city and destroying Democrat Party headquarters. And in my view, and again, if we were trying to be unifying, we should not only
Madam Mayor, may I make a point of personal preference?
Oh gosh.
I'm sorry, Democrat. Democrat.
Wait a second, Mr. Winograd. Mr. Winograd, I'm going to let Mr. Williams. Are you almost done? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not done. But I said Antifa burned Democrat Party headquarters.
Democratic Party.
Yes.
Not Democrat.
That's
Democratic.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Please go through me. Thank you. Mr. Winograd is the term we use is democratic. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
I don't understand the issue. The Anti-Defamation League reports that in 2016 there were 76 people killed by extremists in America. That's almost twice as many as the number killed in 2019, as cited in the resolution. That same year, 17,250 people in America were murdered. Yet this town council took up no such resolution condemning hate, and 5 of us were members then. The prior year, 2015, the ADL reports 70 people were killed by extremists. Again, more than the 2019 number cited in the resolution. 16,000 Americans murdered that year. Town council didn't do anything. 5 of us were on it. The resolution denounces disinformation and misinformation. I'm concerned that when we have resolutions that don't tell the full story, we participate that in ourselves. So I will support this resolution because I oppose bigotry in all forms. But I'm a little bit troubled because this does seem to be somewhat of a political document. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Davidoff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Truth matters, words matter, actions matter. If I was to sit here silently this evening, I would have a problem with that. I do think one of my roles as a local elected official is to speak out against hate and extremism. Our community is better than many places in America because we are a place of inclusiveness. We are a place of diversity. We show respect for our fellow citizens at all levels. Yes, we may disagree on many different things, but I think there is commonality in the fact that we need to treat each other with respect, and we expect to be treated with respect. But at no time can we just sit idly by and not at any opportunity condemn hate, extremism, bigotry, anything that puts people down. We are all born into this world the same, and we all leave this world the same. So I challenge my colleagues. Let's work on things that unify us. Let's work on things that move us forward. Because remember, the truth matters, our words matter, and our actions matter. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. You know, when I think of these words, hate, extremism, bigotry, racism, and we're in 2000, and I know I've said this before, we're in 2021. We have just elected an African-American vice president who's also of Asian descent. And we have a president who was courageous enough to select her because she was qualified. She was qualified. And at the same time, we are still concerned with these issues of hate and extremism because of our differences. Our differences should make us stronger, not further divide us. And unfortunately, there's only a few that wants to divide the whole. And for some reason, that few always seems to get the largest fuel to ignite it. We have to do better. We have to do better for ourselves. We have to do better for the next generation to follow. Because whether we like it or not, the next generation looks much different than we are today and where we are coming from in the past. So we have to stop either pretending or acting as if we didn't know what was done or what was said and to whom, or maybe we knew about it, but we didn't want to say anything because we are still giving fuel to the fire. We have to address these issues, and we have to address them at all levels. And yes, we're beginning. We're starting in our educational system, but we've got to take it much further. As I've said before, we have got to call people out. It may even be family members. People still like to do these racial jokes and thinks it's funny. It's not. And until we're all brave enough to tell people to stop it, until we're brave enough to tell people, until we're brave enough to call people out, that is the only time that we're going to be able to change. We've got to do that, folks. Again, we are greater and we are better together than to point out differences, escalate it into hate where somebody loses their life. Because we don't know what the future holds. If we don't have children, or if our children are not old, our children are young. Okay? We don't know who our children are going to befriend. So we have to be very careful of what we celebrate, and in terms of how we correct and how we educate. If we want a better world, it has to start at the local level. And we have to do some things that we've never done before. And we may be afraid. And when we're afraid, that's when we've got to call some experts with the expertise and guide us through it. We're in 2021. Why don't we let our charge be that we want to see less of these types of resolutions, because we've now mastered those types of outcomes and those types of behaviors. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Does anybody else want to comment? Okay, Ms. Kerrigan.
Hi, yeah, I don't have a lot to say, I guess, other than I personally am confused. It's a very simple resolution that condemns hate and extremism. I thought it was a no-brainer. I read every single one of the whereases here, and I said, yeah, that's where we are. That's what we need to do. That's who we are. So, I'm confused. I guess that's all I need to say. I'm like, this looks like a no-brainer. Obviously, it's not sitting well and I listened really hard, both to Councilor Williams, the birthday boy, and to Councilor Gold. And maybe outside of this, we can have a one-on-one conversation, because I do want to hear your concerns and why it's not a resolution that you feel as strongly about as maybe some of us do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kerrigan. All right, I think we will go to a roll call. I also did not expect there to be the same conflict with people on it. I know that we have there are issues with national issues, and when we feel like we need to make a statement, and I don't want to get into all of that, but I do believe that the work on combating hate and racism begins at home. Begins not only, it's not just local, it begins in your actual home. So I don't think it could be more local. And as Ms. Blank said, you know, the work, there's a lot of work ahead of us, and the work has to be done every single day. But we'll go to roll call, Ms. LeBrook.
Ms. Blanks?
Yes.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Ms. Fay?
Abstain.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
That is 8 in approved and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBrow. Now we are at announcements. I only have a couple. There's the next show at the Playhouse on Park, 12th main stage season is Elliot and Amanda All Alone from Noel Coward's Private Lies. It will stream online February 10th to 28th, and you can watch it anytime in that window. Noel Coward's second act of Private Life speaks to us in a new way. They are sequestered from the outside world. Doesn't that sound familiar? And finding a lot of time to fill up together in this very funny moving adaptation developed by stars Vianne Cox and Ezra Barnes. And these two lovers grapple with hope and fear, memory and desire, song and dance, love and hate in equal measure. Valentine's Day is always complicated. Add in some songs and a pandemic, and you have the makings of a perfect date night. So I look forward to watching that. And Ezra, we have hosted Ezra actually as at our house, and he's a wonderful, talented person. Journey of the Soul begins February 1st. This winter, Chabad House of Greater Hartford and will offer Journey of the Soul, a new 6-season course by the acclaimed Roar Jewish Learning Institute that will answer a question, what happens when we die? Beginning Monday, February 1st, 2021 via Zoom, students who enroll in this course will embark on a journey that will edify them and put them at ease with topics of life and afterlife. Practical and powerful, reflective and relatable. Journey of the Soul teaches a Jewish perspective on life that begins before birth and lasts well into the person's passing. People interested in participating may call 860-232-1116 or visit chabadhartford.com/course for registration. And the last thing I will say is we're in a very unique period of this pandemic. We have to protect each other almost more vigilantly than we ever have with the new strain that is more contagious. And we are on the cusp of really being able to have some security and assurance that we're getting this under control. So it's very, very hard. So we really have to stay in tune and diligent and vigilant on all of these and protect each other in our community. And again, I ask for each of you to reach out and to help a senior, to everybody, anybody watching, to encourage people to reach out to someone and help them register for a vaccine. We will keep you posted, and there will be a lot of information from the town, and you can obviously always call town staff to get answers. They are very willing to help and figure out ways to do this. As Liam would say, we're building the we're building the plane as we fly it, and we're trying very hard to meet everybody's needs and to protect people. And okay, with no more announcements, we have no executive session. Without objection, I move for adjournment. Any objection? Okay, there's no objection. Hearing no objection, the meeting is now adjourned. Have a healthy, a good night. Bye.